Waste the first week of October 2003, and our big old Victorian home was abuzz with excitement. We were preparing for a Halloween party. The kind my mom loved to host, complete with cobwebs in every corner and spooky decor in every tables. She always went all out this time of year, and I was her enthusiastic 9-year-old assistant. I adored everything about Halloween, the costumes, the candy, and especially the decorations. Before I tell you more about the party, it should give you a sense of our house. The front door was a heavy wooden piece with part stained glass and part clear glass. It opened onto a wide front porch where my mom liked to place pumpkins and lanterns. Stepping inside, you entered a large foyer dominated by a sweeping staircase. To the right was the living room, and beyond that, if you walked straight past the stairs, you reached a hallway that opened into a formal dining room. Through the dining room was our kitchen, which always smelled like something delicious was cooking. To the left, off the foyer, were 2 sitting rooms. My mom called them parlors, stuffed with antique furniture, vintage pictures, and peculiar Victorian trinkets. You could walk through these parlors and loop right back around into the dining room. In the days leading up to the party, my mom and I hunted down every plastic pumpkin, paper, skeleton, and rubber bat we owned. She had me bring up all the boxes from the basement, and I spent hours in the front parlor unpacking them. My stepdad was in the kitchen, chopping and stirring agent pot of chili for the party, while my baby sister babbled in her high chair, her chubby hands reaching out for anything that looked remotely edible on the little TV in the kitchen. The local news was showing the weather forecast. A crisp, cool October night, perfect for a spooky gathering. The night of the party finally arrived, and we wasted no time transforming the house. My mom hung black and orange streamers along the banister and strung fake cobwebs across the parlor. Mirrors in the foyer. We set up a life-sized plastic skeleton that dangled from the light fixture, greeting every guest with a toothy grin. Pumpkins with flickering candles dotted the porch, and eerie laughter recordings played softly in the background whenever the front door opened. I was thrilled by the sight of it all, imagining how much fun everyone would have wandering through the parlors and living rooms, ampling candy and giggling each other's costumes. Around 6 in the evening, the guests started to arrive. My older brothers helped pass out candy and direct people inside. Friends of my mom's came dressed as witches and vampires, and a few were even brave enough to wear elaborate Victorian host costumes to match the house's vibe. The dining room table was covered in Halloween-themed snacks, everything from David eggs with tiny olive spiders on top to frosted cupcakes decorated with candy eyeballs. My stepdad's chili simmered in a massive cauldron-shaped pot, and the aroma drifted through every room while grown-ups chatted and sipped cider on back and forth, showing off the graveyard display I had created. I'd laid out small tombstone cutouts and scattered rubber rats among them, hoping to give everyone a little scare. At one point, my mom dimmed the lights and put on a spooky soundtrack. We kids started telling ghost stories in the front parlor. The house's naturally creaky floors and ancient walls only added to the atmosphere, and we huddled close, eyes wide, as someone whispered a legend about a haunted attic. Of course, none of us would dare goop there in the dark, but we loved the sensation of being deliciously frightened. My baby sister, too young to follow any stories, toddled around in her tinny black cat costume, meowing at everyone she passed. The energy in the house was electric. My oldest brother had set up a makeshift photo booth in the corner by the staircase with a polka-dotted sheet as a backdrop, has snapped Polaroids of using our silly poses. Witch hats tipped at silly angles, monster masks leering at the camera. Some of my mom's friends took advantage of the parlor furniture to stage dramatic shots, draping themselves over velvet chalangas as if they were Victorian spirit for one night. Only about halfway through the party, we heard agent knock at the front door. Usually the doorbell would chime. The soft rap was out of place. Curious, it made my way to the weaving through guests through the glass in the door. I saw 2 men standing on the porch and looked older, with shoulder-length gray hair peeking out from under a black cape, and the other was younger with the brown goatee. My child's mind immediately imagined the mask-costumed characters. Maybe they were late arrivals with a spooky get-up, but there was something about the way they stood that felt off. Their clothes looked worn, not intentionally distressed, like party costumes. They noticed me peering through the glass, and the older man smiled, revealing party, and typically we'd welcome more guests. A chill ran down my spine. I remembered my mom's admonition, never open the door for strangers if you're by yourself. I called my stepdad over, and he walked up, still wearing his skeleton apron. I'd lean his hand. He opened the door a crack and politely asked if he could help them. The older man claimed they'd been invited, but neither of their faces looked familiar. My stepdad frowned. "This is a private party," he said calmly but firmly. "If you don't know anyone here, personally, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place." Themen exchanged glances. The younger one shifted uncomfortably, and I caught a glimpse of a beat-up van parked at the curb, For a brief moment, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then they mumbled something about checking the address and slowly retreated down the porch steps. My stepdad watched from the doorway as they climbed into the van and drove off. After he shut the door, he patted my shoulder and reassured me there was nothing to worry about. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Returned to the party, though, determined not to let the strange interruption dampen the festivities. My mom had just switched the music to a livelier tune, and guests were dancing under makeshift strobe lights. The living room was crowded with swirling costumes, glistening vampire capes, neon wigs, and the occasional toddler in a pumpkin outfit waddling through. I joined the group, forgetting the unsettling men for a while children raced around, sneaking extra cupcakes while the adults boogied tooled Halloween hits. I even convinced my older brother to let Mez snap a Polaroid of him in a plastic Frankenstein mask. As the night wore on, the mood remained magical. We played classic games like bobbing for apples in the kitchen. Friends gathered around to watch, howling with laughter when someone emerged with an apple clamped between their teeth and water dripping from their chin. My stepdad's Chiliwas devoured. The punch bowl was refilled twice, and in the sound of chatter, music, and laughter filled every corner of our Victorian home. The atmosphere felt safe, cozy, and celebratory. Eventually, people began to trickle out, thugging one another good night, and stepping onto the porch lit by flickering jack-o'-lanterns. My mom and stepdad thanked everyone for coming as the party wound down. I wandered upstairs, still tingling with excitement. The house was quieter now, but the echoes of laughter and the faint smell of cinnamon insider lingered in the air. Despite that unsettling moment at the door, the party had been a resounding success. I curled up in bed later, thinking about how that old house's solarge and sometimes eerie had felt so alive. Evening, it occurred to me that maybe the real magic of a home is agent or its creaks, but about how it brings people together to celebrate, laugh, and share moments that become cherished memories. Even in the midst of the spooky season, a warm gathering can chase away most shadows, and thought the strange visitors had given me a bit of a fright. I fell asleep, comforted by the sound of my family titting up downstairs, knowing that joy and togetherness outshone any lingering darkness on that Halloween night. This story happened at a big old Victorian home in September 2008. I was 14 and beginning my freshman year in high school. My mom and stepdad ran some local events, and the one in our area, they often stayed there until attended much later, now that 3 or 4 of their kids were in their teens. I was always tasked by my older brothers to watch my little sister, who was about 5. Now my stepdad was on a business trip, and my mom I did not get home until after the night ended, somewhere around 8 a.m. I had long since gotten my sister to sleep and had just started to drift off to sleep myself. Little did I know, my oldest brother was tasked with taking the trash out. And of course, he, being 17 at the time, was always a bit mouthy with my parents, so when my mom got home and saw the trash wasn't out, she was giving him one of those mom lectures as she grabbed both bags, throwing one onto his shoulder, while grabbing the other in his hand. Him made his way down the steps of our back porch with my mom holding the door open for him. As she followed the sidewalk through our backyard, he heard my mom call Mom Zed. Christian, get back here." Now Christian, thinking she isn't done lecturing him, responds, "Yeah, Mom, I'll be back in a minute." Calm down, little does Christian know, is walking past a man just standing feet away. He can't see this man because of the garbage bag on his shoulder blocking his view. After putting the trash into the bin, he makes his way back to the house to find that same man ramming against our back door. With all his might, Christian immediately runs up to the guy and pushes him back from the door. Christian said, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" The guy looks him for a moment, turns around, jumps over the railing from our back porch, and takes off running. My mom the time opens the back door and tells Christian to get inside. Just a few moments later, they hear something at the front door. They quickly make their way through the house to find the guy now trying to break down our front door. Christian opens the door and pushes the guy back again, while my mom starts to call the police. The guy and Christian end up in a fight. Christian sprained his wrist a few nights earlier while he was running from the police, as she was at a house party that got busted by the police. He really didn't want to get busted for underage drinking. Of course, the guy ends up throwing a few punches. Christian's block a few until he hits the wrist that was sprained at this time. Christian goes down, grabbing his wrist in pain, and the guy takes the opportunity to take Christian down. By this time, my older brother Aaron, who was 16 and was a bit bigger than Christian since he was in every sport, woke up and came down to see the guy on top of Christian. Aaron pulls the guy off of Christian and starts throwing punches. The guy is about to fall over the rail of the front porch when Aaron pulls him back down and puts him into a headlock. This is the point. I got to the bottom of the stairs and looked out to see 2 men on the front porch at this time. I didn't know who was who and tried to go out to assess what was going on. only to be blocked by my mom, who was still on the phone with the police. My older brother, Christian, at this point walks past me holding a baseball bat and warns the guy not to get up or he'll hit him. Meanwhile, I'm still confused as to what's going on, and I look to the top of the stairs and I see me 5-year-old sister looking down. I immediately dash to the top, scoop her up and take her into my bathroom. In my bathroom, there was a cupboard filled with towels. And remember, this is an old Victorian home. There are little hidden spots everywhere well under. The towels is a string you pull up and you're able to open the bottom of the cupboard, which opens to another smaller storage area that were never used. I pull the towels out, open the cubby, and tell my sister to climb inside. I tell her not to come out for anyone but meet. This point my mind was made up that if this guy got past my 2 older brothers who are bigger than, there was no way I could stop him, and I just wanted my sister to be safe. I put the towels back, closed the door, and ran back downstairs. A few moments later, I see multiple police cars pulling up and police running up or lawn to help. They ask which one is the intruder and which is my brother, to which my older brother Christian tells them. Aaron lets goof the guy, who is now free, and grabs Aaron. The police order the guy to let them go, but he doesn't. They then start to punch the guy to try and get him off of Aaron. That doesn't work. They then threaten the taser. The guy stillish holding Aaron. They end up tossing the guy no taunts, but Weiss the first time didn't even faze the guy. The guy was finally let go, and the police were able to haul him away. A few days later, we find out that this guy was partying downtown and ended up making our way to our neighborhood and was on drugs, a dangerous combination of drugs and alcohol. Had it gotten in, it is scary to think about what he would have done, or had my brothers not been there. Who knows what could have happened. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. Your support means the world, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. I've always been curious about the dark web. I've heard stories about it, a place where you can find anything, no rules, no limits. It sounded dangerous and thrilling. One night, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to explore it. It thought I was prepared. I was so wrong. I sat in my dimly lit room, the only light coming from my computer screen. I had done some research and learned that it needed a special browser to access the dark web. It was called Tor. I downloaded it and installed it on my computer. My heart was pounding with excitement and fear. After opening Tor, I found a search engine that could help me navigate this hidden part of the internet. It was called the Hidden Wiki. I clicked on the link and a list of websites appeared. Most of them had stranger and names that didn't make any sense, as promised illegal services. Others claimed to sell things you couldn't find anywhere else. I knew I should be careful. I didn't want to do anything illegal. I was just curious. I clicked on a link that said Darket Markets. It took me to a forum where people were talking about different marketplaces on the dark web. They were discussing drugs, weapons, fake IDs, and other illegal stuff. It was scary to read, but also fascinating. Then I saw a link that caught my eye. It said Red Room. I had heard of these before. They were supposed to be live streams where people were hurt or worse for the entertainment of others. I didn't believe they were real. It sounded like something out of a horror movie, but my curiosity was too strong. I clicked the link. A new page opened. It was black with red text. It said enter at your own risk. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop now. I clicked enter. The screen went black for a moment. Then a video player appeared. There was a countdown timer showing 5 minutes. I guessed it was a countdown to the start of the stream. Is that there, staring at the screen? Part of me wanted to close the browser and forget about all this, but another part of me wanted to see what would happen. The countdown reached 0. The video flickered to life. At first the screen was dark, then a dim light came on. I could see a room. It looked like a basement. The walls were bare concrete and there was a single chair. The middle of the room, a person was sitting in the chair, tied up. They had to cover their head. This couldn't be real. It had to be fake. I wanted to believe it was fake, but it looked surreal. Suddenly another figure appeared on the screen. This person was wearing a black mask and gloves. They walked over to the person in the chair and pulled the bag off their head. It was a woman. She looked terrified. She started to scream, but their screams were muffled. I realized she had a gouge in her mouth. I felt sick. This was too much. I reached for my mouse to close the browser, but the screen went black. Again, a message appeared. It said, "You cannot leave now." My heart skipped a beat. How could they know I wanted to leave? The masked person on the screen looked directly at the camera. It felt like they were looking right at me, and they spoke. Their voice was distorted, making it sound unnatural. "Welcome, viewer," they said. "You wanted to see the dark web. Now you are part of it." I tried to close the browser again, but my computer wasn't responding. I pressed the power button, hoping to shut it down. Nothing happened. Panic started to set in. The masked person on the screen continued to talk. "You cannot escape. We know who you are. We know where you are." Tears filled my eyes. This was a nightmare. It tried to pull the plug from my computer, but it was stuck. The masked figure laughed, "We have control. Now you should never have come here." I looked back at the screen. The woman in the chair was crying. The masked person moved closer to her holding a knife. I couldn't watch it. It turned away, but I could still hear her muffled screams. Then my phone buzzed. I jumped, almost dropping it. I looked at the screen. There was a new message from an unknown number. It said, "Watch or it gets worse." My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped. I looked back at the screen, tears streaming down my face. The masked person was still there, standing over the woman. They hadn't hurt Harriet, but I knew they would. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my phone and called the police. My voice was shaking. As I told them what was happening, they didn't believe me at first. But then I gave them my address and begged them to come quickly. Minutes felt like hours. As I waited, the video stream continued, but the masked person hadn't done anything yet. It was like they were waiting, watching me, enjoying my fear. Finally, I heard sirens outside. A relief washed over me. The police were here. They would help. I heard a loud knock on the door. I ran to open it. Sobbing, the police officers looked at me with concern. It tried to explain what had happened, but it was hard to find the words. They came inside and looked at my computer. The screen was still showing the live stream. One of the officers took a look at it and then turned to me. "We need to take your computer as evidence." He said, "We'll do everything we can to track these people down." I nodded, too shaken to speak. They took my computer and left. I was alone in my room, feeling more scared than I ever had in my life. I knew I would never forget what I had seen. I wished I had never tried to access the dark web. Curiosity had led me into a nightmare. I was Westfield in 1997, the year my parents officially got divorced. They'd had their issues for a while, but my dad stayed in our old place while my mom moved us, my two older sisters, our big family dog, and me into a vacant house my grandparents owned. They had recently relocated and left the property empty, so it made sense for us to live. There we stayed for about 5 years, from 1997 to around 2002. And in many ways it felt like a fresh start, but the house itself had some unsettling quirks that quickly overshadowed any initial excitement. The layout was straightforward enough: 3 floors, starting with a ground level and upstairs where the bedrooms were, and a large basement. Despite its size, that basement became the center of our collective unease. It was the kind of space you'd think kids might use for indoor games or storage for old toys and random holiday decorations, but we avoid going down there whenever possible. My mother never explicitly said it spooked her, but she didn't have to. It was written all over her face. Anytime one of us mentions the basement, dog refused to set on paw on those steps which creaked and groaned. No matter how carefully you walked, those stairs formed a sort of spiral that connected all 3 floors. So if anyone was on the move in the house, you could hear each step as its quay ached underfoot. But in many nights, well past bedtime, we'd hear a series of deliberate footsteps start in the basement, pause at the ground floor, then continue up to the second level. It wasn't random scuttling. These sounds were steady, like someone walking with purposes. Sometimes they would stop near my eldest sister's door, other times outside my middle sister's door or mine. Before fading into silence, we'd each huddle, blankets trying to will it away, my sisters, and I would compare notes. The following mornings we'd whisper in the kitchen before school, confirming to one another that yes, well heard the footsteps. So yes, they paused right outside someone's door. It was like an open secret that we didn't dare bring up around our mom. She could handle it if we complained about chores or a missing shoe, but discussions about those footsteps always made her calm. It was easier to pretend it was just the wind or the pipes settling, though we all knew it wasn't down in the basement itself. Strange occurrences piled up. The lights flickered or turned off outright. Event hot. The bulbs and wiring were checked multiple times. Small objects got rearranged. Now and then you'd hear a clatter or scraping noise. When noon was around, we tried to rationalize it, telling ourselves maybe a draft had toppled something, but there was rarely any breeze down the rear. Our dog's refusal to unearth the basement door only cemented our suspicions that something was off. She was a large protective pet who followed us around everywhere, yet she never once ventured down those steps. On evening, my sisters and I were fooling around with some walkie-talkies we'd gotten as a gift. We discovered you could sometimes pick up local frequencies if you were lucky. We aimed to find the police channel or maybe trucker stalking on a CB, thinking it would be cool to overhear conversations. Instead, a voice came through that evening, so close it felt like the person was in the next room. That eerie voice specifically addressed my oldest sister, calling her by name and threatening to hurt her. It never answered direct questions. It just kept making ominous statements about knowing who she was and what it intended to do. We freaked out and shut the walkie-talkies off. Within seconds, Sour Dog burst into our room, barking at the empty air. As though she sensed an intruder, she stood there, a hair one, staring at nothing we could see. It was the only time we'd ever seen her act that defensively, without a visible threat. Another afternoon when my sisters and our dog were out my momin'. I were the only one shome she was busy doing some chores on the ground floor, while I was up in my bedrooms. Suddenly I heard heavy, almost furious-sounding footsteps begin in the basement. They marched up the steps at a pace to stand too forceful to be my mom. The footsteps continued up to these floor until they reached my door. Then came a deafening slam, the door banged shut, locking my inside. Panicking, I screamed. For my mom, she rushed upstairs, tried the doorknob, and found it jammed. Though my door wasn't even designed to lock, sure enough to find something to pry it open. Leaving me alone, terrified, moments later the latch clicked and the door drifted open on its own. I ran into her arms sobbing, and she didn't have an explanation, just a shaken look. There was also this night during a thunderstorm back when my sister were out of the house again. Ordinarily, thunder never bothered me much, but something about this storm rattled me to the core as the storm raged. Outside chaos broke loose in the basement. We heard glass smashing, furniture scraping, and a series of banging sounds. It was as if someone was hurling objects across the room. I still remember my mom clutching me in the living room, both of us. Paralyzed by a sense of dread, the front door kept blowing open and slamming shut repeatedly. Yet the wind alone couldn't explain that pattern. In the morning, we discovered the basement. In disarray, shards of glass, appended boxes, and in no clear reason for any of it. We lived with such oddities for years. They seemed more frequent on days when our dog wasn't present, as if her absence emboldened whatever lurked in the basement. It also seemed to target my eldest sister more intensely, though I never understood why. Eventually, in the early 2000s, we moved out and my grandparents sold the house. My name is Harry. You want to tell you a story which happened years ago in my hometown in Germany. It was back then when things didn't go well for me. I lost my job, broke up with my girl, and life felt empty. I really tried my best, but I never felt peace, and my days went by and things didn't get better. My family owned a little house in the forest. There we call the forests Schwarzwald. It was not really a house. It was like a mix between a little house and a cabin in the woods. We used to be there over the weekend when I was a little boy. I had good memories of this place. It was part of my childhoods. So I decided that visiting this place could help me find myself again. I told my parents that I was about to visit the cabin over the weekend, may a few days more so. I packed my things, took the keys, and jumped into the car. It was not a long drive. It's always the walk from the parking lot to the cabin. When I arrived, memories came into my head. It was like nothing changed. It was a good walk to the cabin. The deeper you walked in, the more the forest became denser. After an hour, I could see it. It was big enough for a whole family. It has 2 bedrooms, a big living room, a shower, a toilet, and a huge balcony from where you can see the big, dense forest. I went straight to the room where I used to sleep as a kid. I unpacked my stuff and put some snacks I brought with me into the fridge. I took my shoes off and lay down on the sofa. When I opened my eyes, it was already dark outside. So I decided to make myself something to eat after the food was done. It took a cup of tea to calm down and relax. I opened the balcony door, walked out, and sat down on a woody chair we had there. The balcony door was opened at an angle through which it was possible to look into the cabin and the living room without being in front of the door. Suddenly thought is all through the glass, something standing in the living room. Immediately stood up, pushing the chair, which of course made noise when I walked into the cabin. There was nothing, silence. I thought I just was tired. After some time I decided to go to sleep. I changed my clothes, brushed my teeth, and went straight to be on my way to the bedroom. I recognized that my shoes were not laying neatly on the floor, as I left them like somebody had kicked them in a rush away. Whatever, I thought, and made my way into bed, but unfortunately, although I was tired, I couldn't sleep that night. Then in the middle of the night, I heard some strange noises at first. I thought it came from some animals, but then I noticed that the noises came from inside the cabin. Impossible. I thought, who here in the middle of the forest? Never. And then the doorknob moved inside me. I died. Is where the door cracked open. For some seconds there was silence. I pretended to be asleep. I was trying to hold my breath. What else should I do? I had no chance. And then footsteps, slow but heavy. It sounded like the person was wearing boots. I was scared to death. He was moving towards me, and then he stopped in front of me. I was lying with my face on the wall, not knowing what his next move was. Silence. My blood runs cold. What now? And suddenly I felt the mattress moving down. He sat down next to me. I tried not to move. I just hoped he would not kill me. Please. And then he spoke. What's, oh boy, are you scared? I know you saw me from outside the balcony, and I know you are not sleeping, but today is your lucky day. Although I didn't find something valuable, I will not hurt you the next time. Just remember to lock the door. Some bad things could happen to you tonight. Then he stood up and walked outside my room in the cabin. Of course, I didn't sleep a second that night. I just waited for the first daylight and disappeared as fast as I could. Since then, my family has never revisited the cabin. I was a new nurse at an old hospital and had only been working there for a couple of months. The hospital, with its creaky floors and dimly lit corridors, always gave me a sense of unease, but I was determined to prove myself as a competent nurse despite the eerie atmosphere. One night, I was assigned to care for Miss Thompson, an elderly man who had been admitted for pneumonia. As I entered his room, I noticed he was staring intently at the corner of the room, his eyes wide with fear. "Mrs. Thompson, I's everything, all right?" I asked, trying to hide my apprehension. He turned to me, his voice trembling. "A girl is standing in the corner. She's been there for hours, just watching me." I glanced towards the corner, but saw nothing, except shadows cast by the flickering light. "There's no nether Mrs. Thompson, it must be your imagination," but I shook his head vigorously. "Nah, she's real. She's been haunting me since I got there." I reassured him as best as I could, but his fear was palpable throughout the night. He would glance nervously at the corner, muttering about the ghostly girl. As the hours passed, an unsettling feeling crept over me. I couldn't shake the sensation that we were not alone in Therum. Every suften, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I decided to check on Mrs. Thompson again, but when I entered his room, he was no longer there. Panic surged through me. I frantically searched the room, but he was nowhere to be found. Just then, a killing breeze swept through the room, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on. I turned towards the corner and saw her, the ghostly girl that Miss Thompson had spoken of. She was pale and translucent, their eyes hollow and empty. She stared at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to run, to flee from the room and never look back, but something held me in place, a morbid curiosity mingled with a sense of duty to my patient. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The ghostly girl tilted her head slightly as if considering her response, then in a voice that sounded like it came from the depths off the grave she spoke. "I am trapped here, cursed to wander these halls for eternity, but you can help me." Her words sent a chill coursing through my vein. "So can I help you?" She beckoned me closer, her spectral hand out, stretched. "Find the locket, it holds the key to my freedom. Find it and set me free." I hesitated, unsure whether to trust the ghostly apparition before me, but something in her eyes, desperation mingled with sorrow, compelled me to listen. "Where can I find the locket?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She pointed towards the hospital's abandoned wing, a place rumored to be haunted by restless spirits. With that, she vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the darkness, determined to uncover the truth. I ventured into the abandoned wing of the hospital. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, sending a shiver down my spine as I made my way towards the attic. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering secrets long forgotten. Finally, I reached the attic and began my search. Boxes piled high with old medical equipment and yellowed patient records lined the walls, creating a maze of forgotten relics. But amidst the chaos, I spotted it, a small, tarnished locket nestled among the debris. With trembling hands, I reached out and grasped it, feeling its weight in my palms. I held the locket, a sense of foreboding washed over me. I knew that by opening it I would unleash forces beyond my comprehension, but I also knew that it was the only way to fulfill my promise to the ghostly girl. With a deep breath, I opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph inside. It was of a young girl, her face filled with innocence and joy. Suddenly, a piercing scream chode through the attics, ending me reeling backward. I looked up to see the ghostly girl standing before me, her form flickering in and out of existence. "You've done it," he said, her voice barely audible over the deny. "You've set me free." As she spoke, a blinding light enveloped her, illuminating the attic in another worldly glow. And then, with a final wisp of smoke, she vanished into the ether, leaving behind only silence. I stood real alone in the attic, the weight of what had just transpired settling over me. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of peace. For I had helped a soul find redemption, and in doing so had discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. I'm Tim, and I live alone in a small ranch-style house on the outskirts of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My job keeps me on a night shift schedule, so I'm used to being wide awake long after everyone else in the neighborhood has turned out their lights. I've never minded the solitude. In fact, it usually suits me until an incident earlier this year made me question everything. I thought I knew about my routine nights. It was January 5th, 2024, a Friday, but that meant nothing to me because I work through weekends around 2:30 in the morning. I realized one of the basements overhead light had been flickering for a couple of days. I'm pretty handy, so I decided to replace the bulb before it burned out. It hossed on his sweatshirts, led into me slippers, and headed down the creaky basement steps with a new bulb in hand. The basement itself is more of a cluttered storage space than anything else. Old boxes, holiday decorations, and childhood memorabilia stacked in uneven piles. I remember being careful not to trip on loose extension cords. The flickering light was near the far corner where my dad's old woodworking bench sits under a small dusty window. I unscrewed the dying bulb and started to put in the fresh one. That's when I heard an olderman's voice calling from somewhere behind me. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, like someone softly calling my name. Timmy heart hammered in my chest for a split second. I questioned if I was just overly tired, but I was wide awake and night shifts had trained my body to be alert at these hours. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a shadowy figure in the corner. There was nothing, just boxes in the faint fume of the furnace. I stayed still, straining my ears, no more sounds, no movement, convinced I was being paranoid. I resumed changing the bulb. That's when I heard it again, the same voice, more urgent. Team over here, 8 chill was heat over men, not the dramatic kind you see in horror movies, but aerial unsettling jolt of adrenaline. I spun around, shining my phone's flashlight into every dark corner. Still no sign of anyone. My mind raced. Could a homeless person have snuck and could a neighbor have somehow found a way into my basement? But that made no sense. The doors were locked and none of the windows were broken. I stepped forward, slowly scanning the cluttered space. My phone's light danced across old crates and dusty shelves. The voice didn't speak again, and I started to question. If I was hearing things, maybe exhaustion was messing with my head. I said nothing out loud, just stood there, and my pulses still thawing, waiting for another sign of life. Eventually I backed away and moved upstairs, locking the basement door behind me for the rest of the night. I tried to focus on a TV show, but my mind kept replaying that softer spy call of my name. I barely slept that morning, which is rare, for usually I can pass out right after work or errands without a problem. Over the next few days, I convinced myself it had been a momentary lapse, like when people imagine their phone ringing or hear someone call them from another room. But I wasn't satisfied with that explanation. The voice had felt too real, too directed. At a week later, I decided to test my nerves. I waited until the exact same time, 2:30 in the morning, and made my way back down to the basement. This time I left every light on upstairs, so I wouldn't spook myself walking through a dark hallway once in the basement. I found a spot in the center of the room and just listened. Silence. I called out, "Is anyone here?" feeling slightly ridiculous, but the emptiness of the room swallowed the sound. No flickering lights, no boxes moving, no voice responding to my presence. I stayed there for a good 15 minutes, hearing nothing but the faint buzz of the new light bulb I'd installed. Eventually my curiosity faded into uneasy boredom, and it rushed back upstairs. That second visit should have reassured me that I'd imagined the whole thing, but instead it left memory unsettled. Something about the first experience had felt soundingly real. Why had I heard it once and never again? It made me wonder if this, whatever it wasn't, needed to catch me off guard, as it thrived on unpredictability and darkness. I tried to go about my life as usual: work, meals, sporadic sleep, but whenever I walked past the basement door, I found myself pausing, half expecting to hear my name from the other side. Sometimes I hovered there for a few seconds, unsure whether it was safer to ignore my paranoia or to fling open the door and check. I never quite mustered the courage to fling it. Topin, it's been months now and the voice hasn't returned. I've told exactly one friend about it, and his reaction was predictable: "Your min Dwa's just playing tricks on you." Maybe he's right. Then again, the older I get, the more is the rare aspects of reality we can't simply explain away with logic or stress.